Managing Director of Constellation Marine Services, LLC. Captain Irani is the founder of a leading marine surveying firm, MS Constellation Marine Services, LLC, operating pan-GCC since 2007. Having completed 25,000 independent survey nominations, a Master Mariner with a valid MCA license since until 2007, from UK for unlimited vessel size with over 32 years of maritime experience. Captain Irani is also the exclusive Deputy Registrar of Antigua and Barbuda Maritime Registry and was invited in 2022 to join the Advisory Committee of Lloyd's Register Marine and Shipping MEA in the area. He has given expert witness testimonials at Abu Dhabi Court of Appeal and the IFC Dispute Resolution Center, and he's member of the Baltic Expert Witness Association. Captain Irani has been on the Institute of Chartered Shipbrokers, the UAE branch committee since 2019, and has served on its education committee since 2008. So let's welcome Captain Zarir.
Good afternoon, distinguished panelists and fellow colleagues. Thank you very much, Ahmed, for the introduction. Without much ado, I will quickly tell you that today's presentation and a video is expected by the organizers and by me personally to have some reactions, some questions within the RESCO committee. It wasn't near miss as far as I'm concerned. The case study, there's only one, but it's very dear to my heart, and I think it is worth paying attention to as we progress with the presentation. I'm going to start with the most common disasters that we've seen, and my presentation is going to stick to the marine aspect of it, although I know there's a lot of SPFO and rig-based pollution awareness and response in the region. Due to lack of time, I'm sticking to the marine aspect and the shipboard pollution aspects of it. I'm particularly paying attention to the Erica incident, which I don't need to repeat, is lingering at the back of everyone's head, and it is very closely related to the Erica incident. And this video is what I saw when I was asked to respond by a certain P&I club when I first approached the incident within hours of this happening. Without naming anyone, that's why the white band is, I don't want to expose the name of the vessel, but it's freely available on the internet on the MIIB website. When you come on the board and approach the vessel and see that with both anchors decapacitated, please pay attention that both the winches are up in the air, and this vessel was fully laden with condensate cargo within a few miles of the pilot boarding ground. Now, when you see something like this, from the boat immediately, with all the experience of your seagoing days and the claims that you've seen, you wonder when and where the oil will start leaking from, and you start worrying about it. And that's exactly what I did. And you can take note of that MAIB report number. It happened in 2015. It was contested, this case was contested in the High Courts in the UK. The significance of this incident in my heart, and it was the whitelisted flag that was flying on this vessel, is that this had the potential of polluting the entire GCC coastline at least spanned 4 countries in the region. It wasn't too long ago, like I said, 2015. And it took us telephone conversation with 8 harbour masters, with federal transport people, and this vessel was not allowed, and she was carrying state oil to come into one of the GCC states, chartered by the state company to bring in this oil. 8 harbour masters and the federal transport conversation later, including the flag state who were involved actively, this vessel was not allowed to get into port. Mind you, there wasn't a spill yet, but looking at the condition, you can tell it was 1 frame away from the collision bulkhead, the damage that had transmitted. And we were unfortunately unsuccessful in convincing anyone, including the berth where she was consigned to discharge the cargo, to bring this vessel in. So my question comes in is, what about ports of refuge? When incidents like these happen, they are not pollution initiated yet, and like our previous speaker said, it is not an urgent matter. To make things worse, this vessel is actually asked to go further away from the coastline so that she won't have any consequences on the coastline which it was consigned by, which actually made the operation that much more dangerous. It took a month for this vessel to discharge all her cargo. Fortunately for us, we were representing the asset owner and the PNI club. We were extremely nervous about this because there was a lot of guidance going from our eyeballs and our mailbox into the PNI clubs and their consultants who were involved. My question simply is, if this happened on your coastline, and I see a few nationalities here within the GCC, and our panel chair, Mr. Capt, who is responsible for sale in Saudi, do we talk about this enough? Do we talk about a welcome of a near potential disaster, a near potential Erica, which is possibly a frame away from becoming a big disaster? It's very well to talk about all the response technology we have, but to talk about the sentiments of welcoming or having a port of refuge, a well-protected one, a well-barricaded one with all the emergency rescue available. Even if it had a day's sailing, I would have probably recommended to the PNI club that this vessel be towed with all the precautions to that port of refuge, but unfortunately we didn't find any. So this is something I would like to be taken into the discussion boards of the RESCO committee, and if the solution comes through, I think I would have done my little part of protecting the seas, because we've seen enough of these cases. We've dealt with enough big ones in the region, like the Brillante Vartuzo, the Kashmir Sima Saman collision, which were all unfortunately cases where the collision created a certain amount of anxiety. So the premise of response today, which is what the topic is, and the preset of this little case that I talked about, we certainly pay attention to the consequences. Strict liability on the polluter. It does not matter how big it is anymore. It is always somebody who will want to fine you heavily. In this region, I must tell you, the consequences and the fines, although given the exploration, are really insignificant. The states don't punish the pollutant enough, or the polluting asset holder enough. I can assure you of that. However, the communications from the states are not very clear, and sometimes are seen as by the underwriter as being indecisive. So that's something which in itself will deter a potential sludge discharge on the sly, coming through. So if there is something that you'll need to come, just pan out, those who've been at sea would say, and have gone to the US coastline, will know for a fact that not only is the vessel owner fined or narrator fined very heavily, even if there is a small slick noticed by any satellite imagery, the master is named, the ship owner is banned from coming back into this thing. The Coast Guard targets the entire fleet. If it's a manager that's involved, the oil major bans you from chartering your vessels. The fine is just one aspect of it. But that's the US coastline you're talking about. There is also criminal liability attached to a pollutant. All this is non-existent in the GCC. And by having that regime in place itself, it will be a deterrent to somebody who is trying to open a tap or bypass the oil water separator, use magic pipes or whatever else that they do these days at sea. But and it also is revenues that can come through for it being diverted to a better oil spill response preparedness, I would think. So I say this to the detriment of asset owners, and I doubt they're sitting in amongst us. But those vessels which are coming here to load, and I hear numbers like 30,000 vessels transiting with only oil, would definitely take this area seriously and not look at a shortcut of pumping oil. We've all seen pictures like these, and pictures like these, every minute is a consequential disaster. The oil will travel further and far and make it more complicated to track. We had a recent case that one of the ports in the GCC had, the state had an emergency flash flood for a few days. Unfortunately, there were a few deaths, and the entire port was locked with oil, similar to what we see in the picture. With all the response and the kits available, even the state has a station there. A local cleanup company was retained by the port. It was a payable claim. We were underwriters, representatives, but none of the RESCO members were activated for it. And I can assure you, the surface area of the harbour was covered at least 45% with thick oil. This is a month and a half or 2 months ago I'm talking about. So there is a better communication to most ports that probably RESCO members have to be, and probably have them sign up as calling them as the first port. I'm not saying that the local company didn't do a good job. They did it as well as they could to the best of their abilities. If there was any handicap, we would have recommended them to be changed, but we carried on. It was eventually a 3-day operation, and it was cleaned up, and the vessels again transited. Yeah, so booms like this, assuring to know from ADNOC Vice President that they have booms to the tune of 4 kilometers prepared and ready to be deployed. This is another, not this is a representative image, but there was a 14 nautical miles. I was talking to some colleagues who were here over lunch yesterday, that there was a vessel which was in the middle of a 14 nautical mile trail of oil which was spilled by one of the four misdemeanors, whom later we realized with the satellite imagery that potentially could have caused this. But there was this one Indian flag vessel, it was a national flag that she was flying and carrying, going up to load to Iraq. On the way back was nabbed by the northern neighborhood, and with armed guards on board after she was taken in under allegations of creating that oil spill. $2 million paid in cash later. They let her go after 3 weeks of being held in that condition. We were able to successfully prove from a satellite imagery station of the U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Defense out of Bahrain, that she was not even in the Straits of Hormuz when the slick had started being initiated. But because it was an American data that we were referring to, it was not considered, and I do not know whether they paid back the $2 million which they had held or not. But a very strong case that was of a potential satellite imagery data which could have been used very much early, a well-agreed understanding with the RESCO membership that they should accept and honor such data if presented, as long as it's authenticated. And we have letters stating that this is unaltered image which was tracked back, and this vessel was actually innocent. And we also named the other four whom they should have gone after, but they were by then already out of the Gulf. So things like these are important. So here's the few immediate steps which are not news to people who are within the response world, but it's worth going through. The vessel, of course, is the best respondent if she is in a condition to respond. So there is very limited oil-board response equipment, but unfortunately, like our first panelists were discussing, training and intensive real-life training is seriously lacking. And I think there should be a ship-based training program which should be more intensified, because the shipboard training is done within themselves, and the first thing the superintendent normally says if it's a small spill is that try to solve it yourself, try to put through the dispersion and get on with it, and send somebody down a coolie ladder and get on with it. Local PNI clubs, with all due respect, they are our clients, as they have lesser and lesser competence within themselves. There are more and more lawyers and less seafarers amongst those claim handlers, and they do heavily rely on likes of yourselves who are international experts of oil spill response. And I think that's the way to go, because if you're dedicated in your way of response, you will be the best people to advise PNI clubs appropriately. Coordinating closely with shore assistance and cleanup contractors. Now let me tell you, cleanup contractors are cleanup contractors and cleanup contractors. There's a big difference in quality. Regional response people, I know an operator in Fujairah who probably gets busy every second or third day to clean up some stains of those 110, 120 at an average vessels which are anchor of Fujairah. So somebody somewhere within your anchorage opens up the tap, and somebody else's hull gets stained. And we know that the Corfucan and Fujairah pilots do a round with the hull first to see if there are any oil marks on the hull, and they refuse to berth the vessel. So this company, which is a local company, is extremely busy doing all these cleanup jobs, and they have nothing more than a few brushes and a few high pressure hoses. They go around and make a few tens of thousands of dollars to just clean up the hull in half a day's job. But hey, that's a day-to-day. That's like the rice and the biryani, like they say. It's always the filler, but it is required. It's perhaps tasteless unless you put enough spices in it, but it's needed for your operations to carry on being economically viable. Recording facts is another thing which unfortunately has a lot of attention to be paid to. When you have drills, log keeping is a key aspect of it that needs to be considered. And in my view, that is important. And this is my last slide. Communications and brand image monitoring is very important, and having press and media in your back pocket is very important. It's too late, I feel, to hire media consultants when a certain incident has happened. your relationship with media has got to be built before that. If you're a regional player, let's say you're a local bunker supplier, physical supplier, you should be having the local media on your side. If you're attending conferences like these, if you are having magazine sponsorships, etc., coming out and speaking, trust me, we do that as Constellation a lot, because we know that having friends or local correspondence before an incident happens is very important. So anybody in the response team should have trade winds and the Lloyd's intelligence and good friends in them, because they will come and write an article in a certainly worded manner if you have a good relationship with them. Of course, facts are the facts. You can't change a black into a white, but there is a lot of grey in between a black and a white, which can be managed by the media and worded appropriately. And the same thing that's written in words is a nice chart that I thought I found that on that website. I was looking for research material, and I thought it's a good presentation of how the flow chart takes place of a particular incident. And it's something that I think should be on a placard in everyone's back pocket who is in the business of spill response. So thank you very much. And if you want this presentation to talk about, you can scan that. There's a blog there from what we write. You can have that information. And appreciate your patient listening.
Very good, Captain Irani. Thank you very much for excellent. If there's any questions for Captain Irani before we leave? I know the questions before lunch are always absent, but we still have a couple of questions here. Easy one.
Hi, thank you very much for the presentation. Well done. Referring to your one of the first slides, and actually with your question to the audience, it's indeed a very good question, and especially like the examples you showed, Erica, Prestige. After those incidents, as we all know, new regulations came into play, and sometimes it's just like we need a big incident to happen before proper rules and regulations will come into play. For example, the Gulf region, that indeed such vessels can be allowed a proper port of refuge. And that's very unfortunate. The Prestige, after Prestige, amongst others, there was the EU guidelines on port of refuge. And these, well, I know that the EU is also kind of promoting their guidelines to the rest of the world. But it's a matter of their only guidelines, definitely not regulations, and it's also a matter of how other countries will adapt to that. But that's, yeah, I certainly don't hope a big disaster to happen, but sometimes it is needed to get things done. And on the other hand, there are also many other players, of course, in the Gulf regions, like SAIL, who can also make an effort to get those things.
Still a start.
Yes, yeah, okay, but some startups can be very effective.
I'll tell you that the Erica incident, with its case studies and a lot written about it, was also flashed out to enough federal authorities and people in charge in Harbour Master saying this is potentially similar to the Erica. The collision bulkhead happens to be intact, but this has a lot of transmitted damages. A lot of frames would have had parted and probably in the seaway motion are rubbing against each other. We don't know what's going to happen, which tank is going to blow up, because there are a lot of questions. When you have a collision of that intensity, it's not limited to where you see it. It's not like a paper, you tear it and it stays there. The transmitted damages could be anything and could have any potential disastrous consequences. There are a lot of things going on in our heads. In fact, there was a time when it took us 2 days to decide whether to go back on the vessel or not, because we would be going up with the vessel if something blew up. So there was a lot of risk assessment done. But definitely there's a coordinated approach to it. And I was speaking at a conference in India when I had this case contested in the lower courts in UK. because it was taken up one of those few cases which went up to the High Court. But without being too elaborate about it, the Sagarmala project with the Indian coastline is making some 60 odd new ports. I said, while there is this initiative, there should be, assuring to know you have a base in Gujarat, there should be a response coordination, and the port should be given a mandate to have at least a berth available for such, you see, because Indian coastline would be the fastest to respond to a large Indian Ocean region. So,
yeah, well, one of the major things of those guidelines of the EU is that a coastal state should not immediately say no. They should always at least get someone involved, like the harbour master, and at least make an assessment, and thereafter he can say yes or no.
So just delete them.
The delay in decision, but yeah, and sometimes it can trigger maybe a yes.
I can tell from experience. Some ports that don't accept these boats, they accept them out of fear and possibilities. Nobody wants to bring in a ship that could explode into their port, regardless of any regulation. So, I mean, not everybody has portable generators, IG generators available at the time, some extra safety measures. So sometimes it's a question if we do not have that safety. But allowing the berth, also most of the berths in the ports in the region are rented out, like in Rotterdam and others. So sometimes allowing berth for emergencies.
I can tell you that during the downtime, rig owners and small offshore supply vessels were 4 or 5 banked. Rigs were not finding lay berths, so there is a case for it. There are enough floating repairs that can be done on the same port berth, so it can be having multiple use. Yet, if you have the Admiralty charts marked with a potential salvage berth for a potential, and a port somewhere on the geographical area like Russell Cayman surrounding the coast or Colombo surrounding the Indian Ocean makes that available, I can assure you there will be enough takers for the vessels that will be occupied for
Take
months.
I know, David, you have a lot.
One final comment.
Discuss with them over lunch with you guys together.
And
So we'll just allow the floor
yeah.
if they have any other question. All right. With that, I mean, I know everybody's keen to go and get some lunch. My stomach is hungry. So with that, please give a round of applause to Captain Irani. And with that, thank you very much. We will conclude the session. Thank you very much. I'll leave that to you guys to introduce. One more thing, the most important is giving the trophies out. Dave, we've got a small gift for you. Thank you very much for participating. Captain Irani.
And maybe on behalf of the audience, we could all show our appreciation also for Mr. Ahmed Abtain for his facilitation of this session.